Michael Jordan, and then there's me. I'm pretty good. Michael Jordan's amazing, right? Even on my middle school basketball team, I got some kids who are smart with the ball. They make good decisions. I've got some kids who don't do that at all, but they can really shoot the lights out. Um, and they all exist on this spectrum of talent and ability. Is it the same thing with this sort of thing? For example, you might come across, like maybe your daughter's the Serena Williams of, doing this. You know what? You kind of get what I'm asking?
Yeah, there is a similarity to that. When a lot of people are just kind of natural at certain skills,
Sure.
and because of them, we see what's humanly possible. But you can train to be as good as Michael Jordan if you put in all the work. You weren't naturally as good, but you can
Mm-hmm.
train to be that good. And
Yeah.
so, to me, it's like if one person can do something, that means we can all do it. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, I think if I can imagine it, I can do it. That's what
Mm.
I actually believe.
I like that.
A lot of the stuff I put in our seminars is stuff I imagined, and people
Mm.
are doing it. I'm like, this is so cool. But yes, like you said, a lot of people still have that mindset that because it's Michael Jordan, I'll never be that good. It's just that
Right.
he's Michael Jordan. Like, no, you actually could train. I mean, I don't know if you're motivated enough.
Right.
A lot of people aren't. It's really not your thing, but you can. That's the point. Like, you have a physical body, you can.
Well, yeah, I see it similarly. For example, like I from age 12 till I'm 5'6", okay? But from age 12 to 17, I had a basketball in my hand every single day. Because at 12, when I had 12, I got cut from my middle school team and was basically told you're too little. And so I found ways to make it work. And I played very competitively for a long time and with my own body and my own mind and my own skill set. So I totally hear what you're saying, and so that makes a lot of sense to me. Um, I want to kind of start transitioning to the beginning and work our way up to where we started. You mentioned you first learning. You could hear people's thoughts. And I'm really trying to relate your experience to like my because some of this is subjective, and so I'm trying my best to like relate it to things that I am. So I don't know what this means, and I don't even like using the word. But I'm a professional social worker and mental health counselor, and there's only one reason I got into that, and I was a medic in the Army is because I know I can walk into a room full of 30 people and I know who's pissed off, not because of the look on their face. I can feel it myself.
Hmm.
And I know who's super excited, but if I get into a room with a lot of people and I don't turn that off, it gets really overwhelming. But how does like empathy fit into this? And then as a child, when was the first time that you like, first noticed you could like do, you know, read people's minds?
Well, that's early memories of reading people's mind. I had other abilities too. I used to be able to hear like what Lidu calls the teachers. I used to
Mm-hmm.
hear. I didn't know what to call it. I thought I used to hear someone guiding me, and and I only heard. I didn't see. And I remember thinking that we all could do it, so I never questioned it. And I remember
Yeah.
thinking like this person is like family, and I'm supposed to listen to them the same way I listen to my mom. I kind of felt that way.
Mm. They made you feel safe.
Mhm. Yeah, and so I remember them telling me what to do a lot, and me listening. It was always good. And then I remember one day my aunt walked in, and she was just very like, "Who are you talking to?" And it wasn't even, you might think it's because I'm doing something weird. It was more like because in my family they told us to never talk to the dead. So it was like a
Okay.
weird background. But I
That's what they
remember.
told me too. Is that you don't know who you're gonna talk to is what I was told. You don't know who's
Really?
you're gonna let in.
Yeah, so I remember her being like, "Who are you talking to?" And I remember thinking, "Oh, I guess I'm doing something weird." And then so I told her,
Mm.
"Nobody." That's like my last memory of, and I was really young. I was probably like 5.
Mm.
And that was like my last memory being able to physically hear. But I still could read the minds, and I remember having lots of I call them like what's it called in foreshadowing. I had a lot of
Mm-hmm.
like foreshadowing downloads when I was a kid of what I would be doing in the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, I remember I have this one memory. I was probably like 4, and I was sitting in a car seat, and my dad picks up
Mm-hmm.
his friend, and his friend gets in the car, and I remember thinking, I'm magic, and when I get older, I'm gonna show other people that they're magic, and I said, "If I live
Boom.
with the son long enough, he's gonna know I'm magic," and I just remember him saying, "Hey, little one," and me just kinda looking, like, showing him with presence that I was magic. That was how I called it back then. But I had lots of downloads of what I'd be doing. I saw the kind of thing I'd be doing. I saw that I would be working with energy, and so I was always kinda drawn to it. My whole life, I meditated and I was into consciousness. I always went to holy places. So holy buildings, I would even at 4 years old, I was walking by myself, and back then that was normal.
Hmm.
And so, and I would
Yeah,
go to
same.
these places and I would like just feel the energy of the room. I would notice they're very different from God or source or whatever you call it. I remember notice like it's cute. They're trying to translate it. They're getting some of it wrong, but I still appreciate what they're doing. And I remember thinking just the energy was the important part. But so I have all of those kind of memories. I didn't actually start until it was in my mid 20s. I had gone through this period of dropping it all and
Sure.
just trying to be
Normal.
materialistically successful and going to school. And I remember I started to get depressed at that time. I went into a deep depression at that time. And I remember going to a therapist for a little bit. And he says to me, like, basically, what are you, if you could spend all your time doing what you love, because I was just like working out and I was working all day and I was just doing all of this stuff. And he's like, if you can spend all the time doing what you love, what would it be? And I said, it would be doing spiritual stuff. And I said, and he says, well, how much of your day are you dedicating to spiritual stuff? And I said, zero, like zero. And then the
Mm.
very next day, I started doing all of it again. I started enrolling in,
Mm.
and I found a Chi Master. This
Mhm.
was in 2011. I found this Chi Master, and it was exactly the downloads. He was showing me exactly the downloads from when I was a kid, and I said,
Hmm.
"Oh my gosh!" Like,
Wow.
and so I started training. I'm still training that same system today, but that training was the beginning of me being able to tell things apart without my eyes. Even with the blindfold, I could tell things apart with all my senses, never with the light though. So the light is how I do it now, but
Okay.
I never figured that part out. But I saw that kids in Indonesia could do it. They can read, they can see colors, and I said, how are they doing that? I'm like, eventually I'll figure it out. And I remember that it always said, those schools always said, you have to be a kid for us to teach you, and only kids could, some schools said only kids could do it. And I said, well, that's ridiculous. I'm like, I have access to the same brain state that they do. And
Uh-huh.
so I'm like, if they
Yeah,
can do
yeah,
it, I
yeah.
can do it. And so I said, eventually I'll get there. Um, so I had this experience years later, like 8, 9, 10 years later, something. It was years later. And so this is a side effect of the training I did, where sometimes I would go into what looks like another timeline or the future or something, but I would be there
Mhm.
physically and I would experience it. So there was this one time I sat up in bed. I think I woke up, but I sat up in bed and I had a blindfold on, and I knew I was in the future or something because I didn't lay down with a blindfold. And I noticed my 4-year-old, who's now 4, she's 2 at the time, she was in bed, and I remember her not being in bed when I lay down. So I said, okay, I'm in the future. And so as I sat up, I had my blindfold on and I could see the entire room. And I said,
Mhm.
oh, I said, I'm going to be doing this. I'm supposed to be doing this. It was my way of getting attention or putting attention on it. And so I said, okay, I'll focus on this. And so I remember laying back down. I get up and I start my day. Later on, I go to do my lying down meditation that I always do. And I
Mhm.
put on a blindfold and I lay down. I said, "Oh," and then my daughter gets in the bed. I said, "Oh my gosh, it's gonna happen now." And then so after the meditation, I sit up and the whole thing happened again. And
Wow.
I said, "Oh my gosh, I gotta do this every day." And so the next day I couldn't do it again.
Mhm.
So I started what I call dark walking. So I put on the blindfold and every day I was trying to see through it. And all I could do, I got to the point where I could see outlines really easy. So I couldn't get around the whole house, but I wasn't seeing any light whatsoever. It was just outlines.
Mhm. Mhm.
And, but I could still get around not having to turn on any lights. It was very, very cool. Did it for like 6 months. Couldn't figure out how to see light at all or to see
Mm.
colors or anything. I was able to see behind me. I was able to, it was very cool. I can get around, but couldn't see colors or lights. And sometimes if objects were on a table, I couldn't see those objects either. It was just like outlines. That's it. It was kind of like
Wow.
Daredevil stuff. So I go to this one seminar. It just all of these synchronicities came together. I go to this seminar in Canada where it's just the beginning for them. They're starting to teach this stuff. They never
Where
really.
where in Canada did you go? I'm dual citizen.
Oh, it was in Ontario. It was in
Okay.
Goderich, the first
Okay.
seminar.
Got it.
And so, yeah, so they never really had any students open because they were brand new. It was Rob Freeman and Wendy Gallant. They had one student open, and so on my second day or first day, I did open. Like I opened. At first, it was just colors behind my head, and then I started. It was just so exciting. I started seeing, I started seeing everything, and they were so excited. Rob Freeman, especially, he was so excited. He said, "For the next one, I want you to come and train." And so ever since then, I immediately started training it using a lot of the techniques that I got from my former training. But basically, I figured out what I was missing, and what I was missing was the light. I had never actually
Mm,
tried to see light with the blindfold on. I had always had it
mm,
in the darkness. And so they had us sit outside, and that's when I opened the sunlight was on my mask, and I started
mm,
to see, and I said, "Oh my gosh, that's what I was missing was the light." And then I figured so much out since then in all the trainings. I figured out that light is a crucial part for being able to see in that way. And so,
mm,
whether you're blind, whether you have no eyes at all, whether you're totally blindfolded with the 100 layers, um, if you just have the light, you can start to see that way, and then you can get away from the light. You don't need the light always, just how you activate
mm.
it. So anyway,
It's how
that's
you
how I just
activate it and how you practice. Yeah. And then thank you for answering that. I asked two totally like separate questions in the same sentence. So how does empathy fit into this? Like, is it anything to do? Because, like I said, it's very subjective. Like, I can't. It's hard. Somebody has to say how they're feeling, and I have to say how I think they're feeling, and we kind of have to agree or something. But I swear by it, Dahlia. I swear it saved
Yeah,
my life.
empathy is, I feel I've always been extremely empathetic my whole life, and I notice whenever I'm training someone, if they're getting tired, I'll feel it a little before they do.
Mm,
It's like we both feel it at the same time, and so
mm-hmm.
it's like, another thing is I have to notice when they are feeling down because, in order to see really well, you have to kind of be in a really good mood.
Uh-huh.
You don't have to, but it's very helpful when you're in a
Helpful.
bad
Yeah.
mood or you're feeling pressured or you're feeling a need to impress or perform,
You're not as
then it
open.
starts yeah, then it's a lot harder to see. So if I notice that's happening, I do a lot of little things where and it's all me having to read that stuff. And so I do a lot of things to get them out of their own mind or their own self pressure. So I'll
Okay.
do things to make them laugh or play games or we'll
Mm-hmm.
switch it and go to those mind over matter games. And that
Mm-hmm.
really lifts up people's spirits when they see themselves putting objects on a wall or something. They'll or if they're really down, I'll bring my daughter in and she really is really good at bringing people because she shows what people don't even think is possible. You know?
Right. Right. So, when did you first like? Was there a first moment where you were with your daughter and you like were like, wait a second, is she reading my mind? Like, can you take us there?
Okay, so which moment? My daughter, she was always a savant or at age 2. She was blowing my mind. Like,
Okay.
so one of the things that she did was, I walked into a room one day and I saw her on my laptop and she was typing out words. And again, she's
Mm.
2 years old. And the words that she was typing, it was a big list, and it was like
Mm-hmm.
words like outrageous and ostentatious, and it was like 6-syllable words. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I remember telling my husband, I think we have a genius here. And I remember him thinking, I don't know, I think she's delayed, because she wasn't speaking or anything.
Right.
But I'm thinking it's because she's bilingual. But and my daughter was also born very, very early. Like she was born 3 months early, so we had her in early intervention. But I'm not picking up anything. I'm just seeing the savant stuff. And so another thing she did, she was a really good artist. And I noticed again, she's like 2 years old, and
Mm-hmm.
she's taking materials from around the house and she's making art. Like she took a bunch of toilet paper rolls one time and she wet them. I didn't know what she was doing. I was like in another room or something, and she wet them and she put some toilet toothpaste on it and stuff. And then she put it all on the wall. And I came in, I'm like, what did you do to my? And I was like, oh my gosh, she did this huge mural. It was
Mm-hmm.
like a house and stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, you
Wow.
know? And she was doing that all the time. She was finding stuff around the house and she was putting it together. And I was like, how is she doing this? Like, how does she even know? Nobody's taught her, you know? And so that was my first instincts. And so, and just to give you some like a comparison, I have a 6-year-old a 4-year-old and I have a 2-year-old right now. He's about to turn 3 in a couple weeks. None of them are even close to doing that. Like,
Mm.
not even close to being able to type and knowing big words like that. And so, yeah, so at first I'm like, okay, she's pretty brilliant. And then I find out she has autism. She's not actually communicating. And that's around age 5. And I could tell she was a genius, and I could tell she was talking to spirits. I could tell, but she couldn't actually tell me.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until she was up until then, I had a lot of instances where she knew stuff. She would kind of say she wanted stuff, and or she would say she would want stuff and she would get it every time. Like something would always happen, so she would get it. So I'm thinking with my background, I'm thinking, okay, she's just a manifester. Okay, got it.
Mm.
I'm not thinking it's telepathy at all. There's times where she's outside and I'm talking to my husband inside, and then she knows what we said. I can tell she knows. And I said, okay, she's just got extrasensory hearing because that's something I also was familiar with and I
Mm-hmm.
had experience with. So I said, okay, she could just hear other houses down. Very cool. But the whole time, it wasn't just that, it was telepathy.
Subscribe to Mike and Dave's Multiverse on YouTube, Spotify, and Rumble today.